This is a very special Sunday because for the first time in a while, we're having our new member welcome for folks who've come and joined in the last few years as we've had a lot of transition going online and offline, back here in person. And so there should be a little piece of paper. And if your name happened to be on that, then you're one of those special folks. And I invite you to come forward here for our ritual of new member welcome. So yes, perfect. Just have you line up right here. So it's been such a joy getting to know many of you, all of you. And for those who haven't joined but have started to get more involved, it's really been a joy. And I know for folks who've gotten to know these folks here and those who are listed on here but who can't be here today, what a joy it is to have you be a part of this congregation. It's fitting that today we're talking about voting and having your voice heard and your values shared into the world. Because your participation in this community is an active participation. It is you, in a way, sharing what your values are day in and day out. And so I hope that you will take to heart the privilege and burden it is to be members of this congregation, a 57-year-long congregation of great ministry and value in this part of the country. And so we have this ritual here that we will read with the congregation saying the first two parts, all of you saying in unison the third section, and all of us together saying the final piece. So let us say together these words which we have used for some time to welcome new members into the congregation. With the ages, we respect wisdom. In the present, we enjoy friendship. For the future, we engage imagination. This day, we recommit ourselves as pilgrims who seek, as persons who share, as pioneers who build. Our congregation can be a cradle for our dreams, a workshop for our common endeavor, a home from which to journey and return.
We accept membership in this congregation, committing ourselves to the deep concern and open dialogue which give it purpose.
And altogether, we will contribute what we can to our continuing creativity, our spirit of warmth and joy, our life of shared responsibility and courageous action. And so now we will each share with you a rose that can go with you, a symbol of the beauty that you are and the beauty that you will bring to this community in the days ahead.
Good morning. And I do apologize. With age, you start losing some things. So my projection is not here. So, if I get a little shaky, that's because this is my first time. But the other part of it is that I just don't have the voice that I used to have. The kids at school could hear me. They can't anymore. But I am Lynn Montgomery, and I'm part of the worship group, Nick support group. And I am also, he's got a therapist and a support, yes. But anyway, I am of the Cheyenne descent, and I wanted to share with you this morning my reflection. I'm sorry. Have you ever heard, oh, I don't think I will vote this year. My polling place is not convenient. The lines could be too long and take too much time. And my vote really doesn't count. It's just one vote. But heavens, Election day is a day off for me. I don't know if we have any other government employees in here, but hey, it's a holiday. So, but shame on us if we've heard that or if we have used that. Assuming that the right to vote will always be there simply because you are white, straight, financially secure, and a taxpayer really is a privilege of democracy, a right, but one that we are in the danger of losing. We know that democracy is delicate and under attack. The attack on voting rights has reached the critical point with discriminatory laws being passed nationwide that disproportionately affect Black, Brown, LGBTQ, and Indigenous voters. November 5th is the day that we can save democracy. And just in case you need to be reminded, I'd like to give you a little bit of history. No sleeping in the back pew. In 1924, Native people were given the right to full citizenship. When President Calvin Coolidge signed the Indian Citizenship Act, also known as the Snyder Act, which gave the indigenous people American citizenship and the right to vote. Oh, by the way, Black Americans won citizenship with the 14th Amendment in 1868. Now, many indigenous don't take advantage of the right for several reasons. One is because they were already members of their own sovereign nations and didn't think it was necessary. Many recognized that voting supported the systemic oppression they'd faced at the hands of the system. The system we are currently a part of is based on white supremacy and colonization. And it is understandable if indigenous folks just don't want to participate. So they didn't think it was important. Some, like my grandfather, was born before 1924, and there was no grandfather clause for citizenship. He was still at war with the government anyway, so it didn't matter. Many live very remotely and too far from polling places, which was a barrier. Many don't have transportation. Many do not have a house number. You don't get mail on the res. Sometimes you have communal living, so there's more than one family in a household. There is unequal access to online voter registration, no electricity, no computer. Or did we know how to use it? This wasn't part of the education, I guess. There were also a lot of opportunities where registration on paper was not available. And believe it or not, many elders still don't speak English or read English. Then you have voter denial because they didn't have a registration card. You also have convictions, prior convictions, and voter purges. So as we watch Washington continue to suggest voter restrictions for many marginalized populations, including white elders and Black urban dwellers, we need to remember that our democracy, built on our ability to vote, is in danger. No voice, no vote, no voice. Let yours be heard. Our first reading is an excerpt from American Eminence, Democracy is an Uncertain World by Dr. Michael Hogue. We are living through a time in which democracy is idealized almost everywhere and yet realized always almost nowhere, even where it is thought most fully to be actualized. Although democracy has had many suitors, democracy remains, as C. Douglas Loomis has put this, a virginal political idea, a promise yet to be fulfilled. But it isn't this as it must be. Is it intrinsic to the nature of democracy, literally intrinsic to the organic conditions of the power of the people, that it can never be realized fully, or at least not in any final form? One reason for this, as Paulina Oca Espejo, I know I slaughtered that, sorry, has recently argued, is that the people are always changing. The people are not a static thing, but a process. But it is also the case that the idea of democracy itself is a process rather than a form, one that is never finally achieved, but is always in a state of becoming. The ideal of democracy as the power, in the broadest sense of the term, of the people, in the broadest sense of the term, entails that the struggle for democracy can't be conducted democratically, which is to say, by people empowered. But it's not only the people, as embodied and embedded, as gendered and racialized, as biocultural animals who are constantly changing. So are the conditions of their empowerment and the threats to those conditions.
Our second reading today is called Democracy's Benediction by the Reverend Lucas Hergert. We are democracy, unruly, unfinished, unrelenting people of rebellious joy, taking to the streets, underground resilience, resisting complacence, the pleasure of activism, organizing into simple hope. We are democracy, people of principle, taking on principalities, witnessing the worth of those called unworthy. Justice just now gaining ground, integrity of interdependent existence extending, living democracy in heads, hands, and hearts. We know that democracy can die, ossify, brittle, byproducts of bygone idealists, plotting politicians, pirating votes, corporations cannibalizing our care for the world. Look, it can wither, distend, come to an end. Democracy, today we will love you alive, make you ours, make you thrive, and vote as though our hope is on the line. Today marks a reawakening, a remembering, and a recentering of one of our core Unitarian Universalist values and practices. One of the central teachings of our living tradition is to acknowledge and amplify the inherent worthiness of our individuality, of our sacred subjectivity, and of our shared humanity, stating in no uncertain terms, your life matters. My life matters, yours, each of us matter. By extension, this is an affirmation that your voice matters, that your actions matter, that by your very existence, by your presence in this universe, on this planet, in this country, the state, this congregation, in this life, your birthright is to be accounted for. To be accounted for. And because you count, because you matter, your voice must be heard. Unitarian Universalism is not only a living tradition, but a lived religion, which means that ours is a religion that is practical, embodied, and action-oriented, rather than a religion that emphasizes conservative, theological doctrines that do not adapt with the changing world. We are a community where our values and our commitments grow and change, clarify, and refocus to meet the pressing needs of today and the hopeful rising horizons of tomorrow. As such, we apply our values to this world day after day, moment after moment, an iterative process, a practice of aligning our inward voice with our outward actions. That is the essence of praxis, where we refine and improve our character and our contexts in life, improving not just who we are, but where and with whom we are as well. This iterative process of action and reflection is ultimately a choice that is yours and yours alone to make. Each Sunday, I acknowledge and express gratitude that you have chosen to be in community, that you have chosen community over the isolating and disorienting world of journeying alone through life. You have chosen to come together, not out of fear of punishment or promises of blessing, but out of a bone-deep belief in our shared humanity and a desire to make this world a more compassionate place for all. So how does this relate to voting? How does this relate specifically to the upcoming election and to democracy more generally? Well, when one chooses to act, whether actively and intentionally or passively and mindlessly, one is in essence casting one's vote, lifting one's voice and claiming one's values. When we choose to live in such a way, we are making these things known, manifesting them, realizing them, transfiguring them from theory within us to reality beyond us. Metaphorically, I like to think of it this way, that I am becoming that which I choose. If I choose love, vote for love, advocate for love, then love is what I become. And vice versa, when I vote or live or isolate or minister in fear or scarcity or despair, then that is what I become as well. And as influential and influenceable beings that we are, we tend to rub off on each other, or at the very least, our choices and add to the collective character, voice, purpose, and vision of this community and other communities that we are connected to. This is also true by extension, that when we choose to vote and choose to voice our values and commitments, we are affecting the neighborhoods, cities, state, nation, truly the world in which we live. In summary, this essential UU value, the importance of making our voices heard, our votes cast, and our lives accounted for, is something to which we must reawaken, remember, and recenter so that we may champion once more this holy commitment. UU the Vote is one initiative to work to center our values in the participation and promotion of democracy, regarding both the current election season we are in and the larger experiment that this nation has been earnestly but imperfectly embodying for nearly 250 years and before we were a nation. Our two readings today speak to the same idea in different ways, that both democracy and we are all works of progress. We are all in progress, in process. Or as said earlier, we are in a lived religious political posture, or more accurately, a movement of which we are continuing to be a part of. Dr. Mike Hogue, professor of theology at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, and my professor this fall, as I begin my Doctor of Ministry program, writes about our democracy and how both it and we, the people who fight for it, are less static and grounded in place and more in a constant state of process and transformation. That our lives and democracy itself are more of a journey rather than a destination. Near the end of his book, American Imminence, Democracy in an Uncertain World, Dr. Hogue, quoting Paulina Ochoa Espejo, argues, quote, "The people are always changing. The people are not a static thing, but a process. But it is also the case that the idea of democracy itself is a process rather than a form, one that is never fully achieved, but is always in a state of becoming." End quote. This reinforces what I spoke to earlier, that we are at once lifelong learners and lifelong actors in the world. Connecting the two allows us to see the way that we are a microcosm, a fractal, an unfolding process within an unfolding process. We are becoming just as each concentric circle beyond us is becoming, to borrow a phrase, an ever more perfect union. And that union, in this case, in case you were wondering, is the union between our values and our actions, between what is and what could be, between this moment and the rising moment, one after another after another. Yes, indeed, it is our work of democracy, of claiming our voice and our vote and applying our UU values to the choices we make, not only this fall, but in the innumerable decisions we make before and after, that is an expression of who we are and why we are Unitarian Universalists. My friends, when we understand why, or should I say, when we reawaken, remember, and when we recenter on the why of our religious, philosophical, and ethical lives, we are able to recognize not only what we are fighting for, but what stands between us and those bold aspirations we hold. You see, it's not just that we value democracy, that we affirm that our lives and our voices and our votes and our actions matter. We also know that those ideas and ideals are under threat of nefarious and oppressive forces that seek not to uplift life, but suppress it, that seek not to amplify life, but control it. Yes, we are clear-eyed, not just in what values we hope to recenter in this country, but also the extremely high stakes and threats that exist within this moral battlefield in which we live. Voter suppression, misinformation, the use of AI and foreign interference, not to mention the psychological and physical threats of violence as manifested through acts of racism, sexism, xenophobia, surround us here in Bartholomew County, in Southern Indiana, throughout the Midwest, and truly in every corner of this nation. Thus, when we say we will UU the vote, we are not merely saying we will apply our values when we enter the voting booth on November 5th, but we will also work day in and day out to overcome the counter narrative and counter values and counter forces that would likewise counter the vision of what this nation may yet be: a more perfect union. We don't have a great track record. There is great reason for those who have been denied their voice and their vote, who have been structurally oppressed by the US government for generations, to trust that their voice and vote matter. As Lynn shared this morning, even after receiving the right to vote as Native peoples received 100 years ago this year, the access to voting can remain out of reach for so many. And when physical restrictions and complications to voting set in, so too does a psychological wet blanket of apathy and pessimism and hopelessness just fall over some people. Does my vote even matter? Many historically and or currently marginalized groups in this nation have good reason to think that their vote doesn't matter, for their voices have not been listened to for far too long, or they have been used as pawns for political conflicts at the local, state, and national levels of government. It is hard for me to say that skepticism in the integrity of our representative democracy is unwarranted by those whose very existence have been seen as less than and under threat for decades, if not centuries. But what is hard for me to wrap my head around is the same sentiment that sometimes comes from individuals who have relatively more privilege and whose identity markers have not been historically, or at least recently, under attack. Due to our electoral system or our geographic political topography, I have heard many people, savvy, politically conscious people, advocates for social justice and the values we hold dear as UU, say something to the effect of, well, because of where I live or because I don't live there, or the reality is just that in this election, my vote doesn't really matter. I mean, how many of you have felt that at times, even in your innermost voice, that your vote might not matter? You might think, well, if we can't turn Indiana this color or that color, then, well, what is the point? Or you might say, we aren't this state or that state. Those are the states that matter. Those are the places where your vote matters, where your voice matters. And yes, you are right that electoral politics complicates what our country pays attention to every 4 years. But on the other hand, it dramatically reduces our democracy and our UU values of the power of our voices and our choices in life to a geographically discriminating worldview of where the sacred transformative power of love can and does show up in this life. Let me say that in a different way. When we say our voice or our vote doesn't matter here, due to whatever political argument one might make, and say rather that one's voice and vote really matters over there, over in that state, or in that election, or in that referendum, we are saying in effect that the transforming power of love, that which is at the center of who we are and why we are Unitarian Universalists, can only be realized under certain conditions. No, my experience of the transforming power of love, perhaps similar or different from yours, is that it has, does, and must be summoned, embodied, shared, and cast wherever we go. As Ralph Waldo Emerson said, be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual, works of love. By reclaiming that our vote and our voice, our actions and our choices in this election and in this life matter, we shift from myopically seeing the outcome of our love only in the color of the state in which we live or the data points to which we are too often reduced, to a wider vantage of love that spans across both time and space, reawakening us, remembering us together, that we, from that vantage point and posture, can make works of love again and again, a continuous ritual of our lives. From that vantage, from that posture in life, we act not solely out of a simplistic notion of relative human value and human impact, but out of a belief and commitment to a universal love that we can share with one another and our communities in all the days of our lives. In this way, we are not only saying our voices and votes matter, but we will use them and amplify them not just toward the ultimate end of our aspiration, but as guiding lights for each moment along the journey, along the process. Because we have said, just like democracy and each of us, we are a process. We are in process, a process of love unfolding. Brought together, democracy, you and I, we are one in our reawakening, our remembering, our recentering, our saving of this work in the world. Or in the words of the Reverend Lucas Hergert, we are democracy, unruly, unfinished, unrelenting people of rebellious joy, taking to the streets underground resilience, resisting complacence, the pleasure of activism, organizing into simple hope. He goes on, we are democracy, people of principles, taking on principalities, witnessing the worth of those called unworthy, justice just now gaining grounding, integrity of interdependent existence extending, living democracy in heads, hands, and hearts. And he concludes, democracy, today we will love you alive, make you ours, make you thrive, and vote as though our hope is on the line. Dear friends, let us make it so. Amen.